Well, pipeline politics is the story of the 5-year saga of politics and diplomacy over a major piece of cross-border infrastructure, the proposed Keystone XL pipeline. There'd been another pipeline proposed and approved within 21 months in the Bush administration, and now we're in the 6th year of this project, and no one knows when, if ever, it'll actually be approved. So we wanted to take a closer look at how did we get here? How did a piece of pipeline become a political football in a presidential election and such a big issue between the Canadian and American governments and sort of a shadow over cross-border relations now for several years?
I'd say, Stephen Harper, you're the ones with no brains. It's a no-brainer that we need to accept this. You're the one that don't have no brains. We don't have to accept this. We are Americans, and we do not need your tar sands.
According to our Constitution, you know, we own this property, and we have a right to own this property. And I've never seen any asterisk in the Constitution that says this property is only yours until a big corporation wants it.
Well, to really understand what happened with the Keystone Pipeline, we had to go to Nebraska, 2,000 miles west of Washington, D.C., where the farmers and ranchers and landowners had mounted a campaign against the pipeline and actually persuaded their own Republican governor to oppose the initial proposed route. And it turns out this was a very important piece of the story because Nebraska gave the Obama administration sort of political cover and time to move their decision-making past the presidential election. So Nebraska was a big part of the story of why we're still here all these years later. And we wanted to go there and really meet the people and talk to them about their interests, their land, their homes, the way that they farm, and what the pipeline meant to them. And when we got there, we found that these people were not climate activists. They were conservative Republicans, and they had a whole set of concerns that were very different from what you usually hear about in the big national debates over the Keystone Pipeline.
It's a no-brainer. Keep it in Canada. We don't want it.
Well, we met Abby Kleinschmidt, who was a 5th-generation farmer on the same piece of land in Nebraska that her family had been farming since they homesteaded there in the 1860s. And that really gave us an insight into the kind of emotional attachment that people there have to the land. Abby's grandfather had lost the land, and then his family bought it back after the Great Depression. And so just talking to her about her incredible attachment to the farm gave us a perspective we didn't have in Washington, D.C. But it also gave us a perspective into some of the unjustified, perhaps, fears that landowners there had. There was a rumor going around that this pipeline was really there to take the water out of their aquifer and send it to Texas. And it gave us a sense of the kind of suspicion and fear that surrounds this project in Nebraska.
It's been a gross spectacle, and it's been, frankly, a gross spectacle to watch Canada turn its diplomatic corps and things into just shills for dirty oil.
This oil is going to be developed whether or not Keystone is approved, and it's going to get to markets. And I think the one thing that Americans need to think about is what market is it going to get to.
It was almost the perfect storm, and that's what's so interesting about this story is you had the concerns of local people in Nebraska rising up and coming out at the same time when, quite separately, you had a rising national climate movement that was really composed of people who had believed in President Obama, who had voted for him, worked their hearts out for him, donated their money to him, and really wanted to see action on the climate. And in his first term, they felt that he didn't really make good on that promise. One big item on their agenda was climate change legislation, and he didn't manage to get that through the Congress. So you had this frustration that met with this new carbon energy project and really blew up the whole issue just in time for a presidential election. And so that mix for the first time, made a bilateral Canada-U.S. issue a major political football in the national presidential debates. And it's very rare that we ever see that.
When you get a rock-ribbed Republican state and a Republican governor saying, whoa, hold on here, we don't want this now, it gave an opening to the president, because a delay now would give him an opportunity to deflect some of the harsh charges from his Republican opponents that this was cynical politics.
Well, we hear from a broad range of key players on all sides of the issue. The Canadian ambassador, Canadian minister, Alberta envoy to Washington, D.C., as well as a congressman from Nebraska who was instrumental in pushing legislation in favor of the pipeline in Congress. We hear from national environmentalists, including Bill McKibben, perhaps the foremost climate organizer in the United States, as well as a variety of people in Nebraska who made this issue have such a big impact. And we speak with analysts who analyze both energy markets and congressional politics to try and help us understand how we got to this point, year 6 now, of the Keystone discussion.
Our biggest challenge has been all the factual statements made against it that are not factually correct. I call them the frozen facts, using numbers that are 20, 30 years out of date in terms of water utilization, using numbers on emissions that are out of date. And so part of what we had to do is correct the assertions that have been made by people opposed to it.
Well, we wanted to tell the story from beginning to end of how it happened, who made it happen, what was motivating them. But beyond that, not just telling the narrative, but asking each key player on every side of the issue, what have you learned? We've been here now for more than 5 years, and everyone's taken away some lessons. The Canadian government, the TransCanada, the corporation, the landowners, the climate organizers, everyone has learned something. And what was interesting to me was when you ask them that, they all have very different and very conflicting lessons that they're taking away from this issue to then use again in the next fight, because it seems to me that there will be many more such disputes over energy infrastructure as we go forward.